Oh God! Pull up! Pull up!
Hello, fellow Novians. My name is Rob, and welcome to another episode of my tutorial series. Today we will be talking about piloting, how to fly those ships. So normally you can learn how to fly on a really crappy ship in the piloting tutorial that the game gives you. But that, at this point, is kind of broken, and it might still be broken at the time of this video. So welcome aboard. Let me tell you how to fly. First off, I am here in my Scantron Max. I'm going to be using a large ship for this because large ships are generally harder to control than smaller ships. So we're going to go ahead and use a large ship for this demonstration. This ship is available on DU Creators. I'll go ahead and drop a link in the description. You can also come see it at Chimera Shipwork Showroom, which is the org I'm in. And if you're interested in joining, just hit that F3 key, go to search, type in Chimera, the little searchy search thing, click there, and send application. Easy, simple. If you want to join, we're always welcome to help out new players. We're always willing to help out new players, because I can't talk today. Anyway, let's get right down to it and look at the first thing that I like to go through in all my tutorials, and that is skills. So if we go ahead and hit the F2 key, we're going to go look at the piloting skills. So not all of these are important depending on what you're doing. If you're just starting out, you can kind of ignore the space pilot training skills right off the bat. Unless you really want to go into space right away. This video will just be covering atmospheric flight. I might do a little pop into the atmosphere, upper atmosphere, go a little bit into space. We'll see. But let's look at some starting out skills. You have your hover engine pilot skills. So you have hover engine thrust, which gives you a +5 max thrust per level. You have your fuel efficiency, which gives you a 5% negative fuel consumption per level, and you have your height management, and that is how high your hover engines can lift you when you hold down the space bar. So I got my thrust control up and a little bit of these skills, but mostly most of my ships use vertical boosters. So my smaller ships use hover engines. So I started training my vertical boosters, but just be aware that vertical boosters use space fuel and not atmospheric fuel. So if you're designing a ship or you're flying an atmospheric ship, it might only have the hover engines. So these are useful skills to learn. If you look then at atmospheric engine pilot, these are for your atmospheric engines. So you have your engine warm-up, which is how fast it takes your engines to get from 0 to full thrust. You have your fuel efficiency, which is how much fuel your engines consume. So if you get those skills, you can control how much fuel you're burning. Thrust control, which is how much overall thrust your atmospheric engines are putting out. And engine efficiency, which is the atmospheric effect on atmospheric engines. So how well those engines push through an atmosphere. Some of these require pretty high presets to get to learn. So if you look at level 1 of this, it requires that I have atmospheric engine fuel efficiency 5 before I can even train this skill. So that's why I have not trained this skill yet. I only have about 4.5 million points used in talents. And those are split between piloting and mining at the current moment. So if we look at ailerons pilot, this is also important. These are how well your airfoils maneuver under power, so how well the fake wind catches your ship and keeps it aloft. And the airfoil optimization is +10 airfoil speed ratio. And then this one, like I said, requires some other skills like this at level 4 in order to train this. So always look at the prerequisites and what you need before you can start training a skill. Now, those are the piloting skills. If you just focus on these piloting skills, that will be just the skills that you yourself use to when you're flying a plane. So when you sit in the seat, these are the skills that take into account. Now, if you see a skill that says technician, this is if you're building a ship. And these skills benefit you for building. So if we look at these, like let's look at atmospheric fuel tank handling, right? You'll notice that this one says plus 20% fuel tank volume when put down. So if you're building ships, and that's your goal is to build ships, then I would say get these skills up as high as you can. People pay good money to have boosted components. So if I had this at plus 5, then that would be 20% times 5 fuel tank volume when I put that fuel tank down. There are other things in here. 2% thrust to atmospheric engines, hover engines, and airfoil. So that is beneficial to piloting. But you'll see a lot of these skills are when put down, like airfoil handling when put down. So that's going to increase the power of your airfoils, etc., etc. Atmospheric engine handling is going to give you more max thrust when put down. So keep that in mind. If you're going to be building ships, you want to put more points into these technician skills as well as the piloting skills. But if you're not planning on building ships and you just plan on buying ships, then train the piloting skills. They will help you out. And that is for everything. So we can look at like the fuel flight support pilot. These give you boosts to your thrust control, your adjusters, your brakes, your retro engine brakes, so the space brakes, etc. And then vertical boosters are obviously for vertical boosters. They have the same skills as the hover engines. They're just specific for vertical boosters. And then space engines are specific to your space engines. So the same as atmospheric engines, but for space. So you have your fuel efficiency, your warm-up optimization, and your thrust control. Rocket scientist is the same as space engines and atmospheric engines. However, use rockets at your own risk because they can make your ship go past burn speed almost instantly and have you blow up a lot. So they're good in space to get you going faster. They're also can be good in atmosphere if you're carrying a heavy load and you want to get up to speed fast enough. Or break orbit faster. But in general, rockets are dangerous. They can make your ship explode. So just be aware. I do not use rockets in any of my buildings, in any of my creations. So that is the skills. So let's go ahead and sit down in one of these seats. I have 2 piloting seats here. This one only has the default, so we can go through this, and then my other seat uses the DU Orbital Hud, which I'll talk about a little bit. So let's go over what you're looking at when you sit down in the seat here. I'm gonna hit tab so I can get my mouse. This right here is your throttle. That's controlled with your middle mouse button. The rest of this is kind of it's information. It's not really important information. The most important information is your throttle and your speed. This right here is showing how much fuel you have in your tanks. And for some reason I'm drifting backwards. And that's for my space tanks. And then this one here shows my atmospheric tanks. And then this dynamic core unit M, this right here is important, altitude. So we are at 27 meters. As we start to lift up, you'll see that number goes up. So spacebar makes you lift up. Control is your brake. And then if you are in keyboard control, then S is pitch up, W is pitch down, and D is your right yaw. A is your left yaw. So let's go out, you can see. A is your left yaw. Q will make you roll. So if we go up here, Q rolls to the left, E rolls to the right. You could also use R and T to increase your throttle if you don't want to use your mouse button. So let's land again, and we will talk about different controls. So if you do not like keyboard control, on the default HUD, if you right-click on your piloting seat and you go to Run Default Auto Configuration, you can see you have your flying construct and ground construct. So if you get in a seat and you have not set it yet, you will need to set that as flying construct for ships. Now under Advanced, if we go to Change Control Scheme right here, you'll see that we have the, I lost it, Advanced Change Control Screen. You can see by default it's set on keyboard. You have keyboard and mouse. You also have keyboard and mouse for virtual joystick. If you don't know the difference, keyboard and mouse, the ship moves when you move your mouse to the left or to the right. You kind of have to drag your mouse around to get it to do a full 360. Virtual joystick is when you move your mouse slightly off center, the ship starts turning in that direction. I just like to use keyboard. But if you want to try out any of these other schemes, all you got to do is click them and they will change your control scheme. So if you get in the seat and you're like, oh no, it's got mouse control, what do I do? You just go to Advanced Control Scheme and keyboard down here. Click that and you're good to go. Right? So that is the basics of that. I do not like this HUD. It does not give you near enough information for my for safety of flying, which is why you end up crashing a lot when you have this on. It's good displays for how above sea level your core is and stuff like that. As you're flying, you can monitor your altitude there, but it is small. You can see it's very small, so you kind of have to look over there a lot to see how far you are. What's my altitude? It's at 27 meters. Okay, but I'm trying to also look ahead. Oh, I hit a space tower, and you're dead. So for my sanity, I'm going to be using the DU Orbital HUD, which you will see as I get into the seat is a lot more versatile, and I will give the link in the description on where this is located. The GitHub page is very concise on how you install this, and once you do, it's very easy to just put on all of your ships. So as you can see, now I don't have all of this stuff over here, so I have to look. Most of the information is in the middle of my screen. So I have my altitude right here. I have degrees of pitch up, pitch down. I have degrees of roll, and I have my throttle right here. And this right here is very important. This is how fast you're going up or how fast you're going down. So if you're coming in from orbit and you see that you're at negative 150 meters per second, you're probably going to crash because you're going down too fast. Or not. Depends on how many wings you have, really. But we're not going to get into super duper how wings work or whatever in this video. I think I already did a video on that. Anyway, this HUD is pretty good. It's got a lot of settings. I will do a video just on how to use this HUD, but we're interested in just flying for now. So let's go ahead and get started. So in this HUD, you just go ahead and hit G, and that auto lifts you off the ground and gets you ready for travel. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to spool up my throttle, and you'll see it moving there on the right. I'm now at 100% throttle, and my brake is still engaged. One of the tricks you can do when flying is to let your throttle build up. So let that warm-up time go while your brake is engaged, and then when you release the brake, you'll get a good, nice boost forward. So I'm going to kind of angle my ship up a little bit. Let's do a 10-degree angle, and I'm going to release my brake, and you'll see how fast I get going forward, which is enough right off the bat to get me off the ground. And on the left over here, you can see that I am climbing, obviously. And over here, on this one, you can see that I am going up at 60, 70 meters per second, 72 meters per second. So we've got a good climb. All right, if I level off, you see that number drop over there. So I can, oof, this thing rolls very well. You can see your yaw degree there in the middle. If I try to yaw more, you can see it changes. Anyway, you can see now I'm only climbing at 16 meters per second. If I get it perfectly level, it'll go to 0. So that kind of is the basics of flying. Watch your altitude on the left. If it keeps climbing, you're going to end up in orbit eventually. So if you don't have any space engines on your ship, you kind of want to level off and make sure that you're not climbing too high. If you hit 3,400 meters, you're going to go into space, and if you have atmospheric engines, you're just going to drift for a while until gravity pulls you back down and your atmos kick back in. By default, ships do not have any radar functionality. So if you're flying a ship and you hit V and it does nothing, like if I hit V, you can see those orange squares down there just popped up, all these like they do in your regular HUD. That is because I have a radar on the ship, and that is just for my sanity so I don't hit things that are just floating in the sky. And as I said, try not to keep climbing because you're going to go into orbit. So let me level off here. There we go. So for radars, you just link the radar to the seat and it should automatically start working. If you get in your seat and you hit V, you'll see icons pop up, and that'll keep you from hitting space towers and other things like that. If you hit Alt V, hold down Alt, click V, you'll get this menu. So by default, you have display territory tiles. Well, if I turn my radar on now, I'm now flying through space tiles, which can be very distracting and just overall bleh. So that's why if you go into Alt V, you can turn those off, and now that is no longer part of your radar. Same thing with space. Anything you don't want to show on your radar, you can just click it off. Just make sure you click it back on if you want to see it again. All right. So that brings me to the X button. So let's talk about the X button. Oh, and I went in orbit. You can see my my space engines are starting to light up there. That's because I went above the atmospheric line and hit the orbital line. So let's get back down and my atmospheric engines will kick back on. There we go. So if I hit X, you'll see down there, trajectory, display mode, velocity, instant. So you can see that creates this green line out of the front of your ship, which shows your velocity direction. If that falls off, like if I cut my engines right now, you'll see my velocity starts falling. And eventually that arrow will change and I will crash. So I don't want to do that. So let's move on. This one's not so handy, but if you hit X again, it now shows you velocity and thrust instant. So if you're flying a ship, you should see a bunch of red arrows pointing backwards. That means you have thrust. If I turn my engines off, those disappear. So I no longer have thrust vector, right? Turn them back on, you see them again. If I roll, you'll see these purple lines. That's showing my adjusters and also my ailerons and what they are doing at any given moment and how they're helping me roll or turn, right? If I try to yaw, you'll see my side ones kick on, and you can use that as a very interesting tool if you're building ships to make sure that your adjusters and your stabilizers are all lined up correctly and are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So if you're getting some weird movements, that's a good way to tell. And if I hit X again, I get this red line. So this red line tells me where I'm going to land. If I were to cut my engines right now, that is where I would crash, at the end of that red line. If I cut my engines and I hit my brakes, you can see that red line coming in closer. Yeah, that means that's where I'm going to crash now. As I speed up, that red line will go back out further. As you go into orbit, you'll see that red line turns into like a blue line or a purple line that shoots out into space, because you're no longer fighting gravity. So that's an important tool. If you're coming in from space, it's good to turn that on to see like where exactly you're going to end up when you come in from space. Now, my ship is going 865, 870-ish. Most ships, when they hit about 1050, so I'm going to put on my cruise control, which by default is Alt-R. Cruise control allows you to set a speed. So now if I scroll my mouse wheel, you see over there, right here, under cruise, so you see that changing when I scroll my mouse wheel. So I can set my speed. So let's set it to 1100. And I'm going to pitch down to build up some speed here. And as I hit past 1050, you're going to see that the front of my ship, yep, you see that flame? That's because I am now past burn speed. Yep, so I'm now going past burn speed. If you don't have any honeycomb on your ship, your components will immediately start taking damage. And you can see right here, this thing floating here, that's why I have my radar on, because otherwise I might hit that. So as you get past burn speed, or I'll hit that, you'll start seeing those flames in front of your ship. If you go into like 1200 meters per second or 1400 meters per second, or let's say that you're coming into the atmosphere at 2500 kilometers per hour. If you hit the atmosphere at 2500 kilometers per hour, your ship is immediately going to explode because you're way past burn speed that the ship can handle. Now, extra small cores with the right honeycomb in certain places can go like 1300 kilometers per hour without hitting burn speed. So it varies, but most large ships, you're going to hit about 1050 before you start seeing these flames. And this ship I have tested will do 1100 without damaging anything. So let's get out of cruise control, and that's going to drop my speed back down, so I'm using my actual throttle. A thing to note, when you come out of cruise control, your throttle will drop to 0. So if I hit Alt-R, right, I'm going along. Let's say I'm set at 940 there, right? When I hit Alt-R again, it's going to start with my throttle set at 0. So make sure if you come out of autopilot that you throttle up. Otherwise, your ship will drop and crash. Now, what I'm going to do is I'm going to turn back towards base. So the way my wings work in this simulation is that they are keeping me aloft because I am moving forward. I have enough thrust going in a forward direction to keep me from crashing. Actually, let me keep that line up. And oh god, I thought my game was going to crash there for a second. Stop. Jesus. Okay. So the way to make a turn is to roll into it like fighter pilots do in the real world. Okay, I don't know what's going on right now. Oof, choppy. What is there, like 6 million ships underneath me or something? Alright, I'm going to wait till that stops before I try to make a turn. So what I want to do is I want to roll into my turn, and you'll see this red line there. Kind of follow along with me. So as I roll into like a 49-degree turn, I can kind of use my S key to nose up, and you can see that red line is following right along with me. Now in this HUD, if I lose lift, I'm going to get a stall warning, which is very helpful. In the normal HUD, you will not see that. But you can see it's coming right around. I'm getting pretty good turn everything's good. I can just sit here and hold this turn pretty much all day. So I'm going to turn back towards my org's base. We're going to head in that direction. And then all I do when I get there is just level out. So we're going to level back with the horizon. And we're good to go. So now I'm going to get some altitude here. Oh, I'm already in space. So, oh crap, and I'm hitting the burn limit. So let's get back down. I managed to increase my altitude while I was doing that turn. So now I'm actually using my space engines instead of my atmospheric engines. So you can see how easy it is to just accidentally end up in space, especially if you're flying an atmospheric only craft. And now my space engines will push me well into burn limit, so I'm kind of tapping my brakes here until my atmospheric engines take back over so I don't burn up. So the other kind of turn is a yaw turn. And if you try to do that, well, watch what happens to the line there. So I'm going to yaw turn to the left. Watch how long that line takes to catch up. A lot longer, right? And if I do it too much, I'm going to get that stall warning because my ship is still traveling in the direction that I was going. And this is exacerbated as you add weight to a craft. So the more weight you put on a craft, the more you're going to have issues with doing a yaw turn. And I apologize for the little choppiness. This base underneath me must have a lot of stuff going on. Okay, so I'm going to purposely try to do a yaw turn that's going to cause me to lose my my lift. Oh, wow. Yeah, there's a ton of stuff down there. Oof. That is a lag base. I don't know what that is, but that is causing me some lag. All right. So I'm going to yaw turn to the right, and you can see my ship is still trying to go towards that red line. There's the stall warning. And I'm just going to start losing altitude until that line comes all the way back around to the front. And my ship is completely empty, so that's not going to cause too much of a problem. If I was loaded with like a kiloton of weight and I tried to do that, I would crash. But you see how long that line is taking to come back around? That's because I'm still going in that direction. Until that line gets in front of me, that is telling which direction I'm going. So if I'm going to point my mouse at the direction the ship is still going, if I do a yaw turn in this direction, my ship is still going in that direction right there. So my ship is now traveling sideways. And my wings cannot generate lift if my ship is traveling sideways. So I'm going to lose altitude until that line catches back up. So generally, don't do yaw turns. It's just going to make your ship crash 9 times out of 10. It's great for like small adjustments if I just need to go like a couple degrees. So let's say I just need to move towards my base over there a little bit more. I can do a small adjustment with my yaw. It's going to take a little while for that line to catch up, but small adjustments are okay. You're not going to kill yourself doing small adjustments. All right. So we talked about burn speed. We talked about radar. We talked a little bit about weight, but let me touch on that a bit more. The more weight you have, the harder your ship is going to be to control. So it will not lift as far off the ground with your vertical thrusters or your hover engines. The turns will not go as fast. It'll take a lot longer for that line to catch up, and you can see it's still not catching up very well to where I want to go because I just did a small adjustment. The more speed you have moving forward, the faster that line will come forward. But a lot of people talk about, oh, my shift is drifting. Well, if you do a yaw turn, your shift is going to drift. If I come over here and I just do a roll turn, you can see how fast that caught up. Much better to turn that way. We talked about skills. Let's talk about damage. So if I crash my ship into the ground here, I'm going to damage a lot of components. I'm probably going to kill myself. I know I said in a earlier video that if you get out of your seat in a crash, you will save yourself. Well, the devs have changed that in the last patch. So now if you crash, everybody on your ship dies, whether they're in a seat or not. If the core is destroyed, everyone dies. So that is a new change in the update. So do not go by that previous video. That was in a previous patch. So hopefully you're watching this video, you now know that if you crash your ship, everyone dies now. And I'll probably go back and put a description change into that too. Not that many people read descriptions because, you know, it's hard. But that is something to keep in mind. Now, if you damage your ship in PvE, your ship can be repaired completely. Any PvE space where you crash your ship, you can repair it completely as many times as you want. When you're in PvP space and your ship takes damage, there is a number that ticks down on how many times a component can be repaired. Now, by default, it's 3. So if let's say that in PvP I destroy my engine, one of these engines back here, 3 times, well, on the 3rd time it's completely destroyed. I have to throw it away. There is no way I can repair that again. So I now have 1 less engine unless I brought along a spare engine. So keep that in mind, the difference between PvE damage and damaging your stuff in PvP. Weapons will also blow apart the honeycomb that's around the ship, and you'll have to either repair that manually or use a repair unit, which repairs a ship to a stored blueprint. So if you have not blueprinted your ship, do that. It's very important. What else? We can talk about fuels real quick. Depending on the fuel type, the only atmospheric fuel that you can have is nitron. It's pretty standard for atmospheric fuels. Now, if you look at space fuels, you might see K1, K2, K3, K4. There is no difference in space fuels except by what they're made out of. However, you cannot mix space fuels. So if you buy a bunch of K1 fuel and then you find out later that you only have the components to make K2 fuel, well, the K2 fuel will not go into a tank that already has another fuel in it. What you can do is take all of the like say you have K1 in all your engines, but it's at like 50%, right? If you pull all of that out of your... I'm going to go ahead and go into space real quick for this last part. If you go ahead and you pull all of that K1 out of that fuel container, you can then put K2 in it and the engines will use it. But you cannot mix space fuel between containers. So you can have one container with K1, another container with K2, another container with K3. They'll all still work as space fuel and so forth, but you cannot like replace K1 with K2 unless you drain the whole fuel tank. Hopefully that makes sense as you get into space fuel. So I am now in space, but I am still in gravity. So as I'm climbing here, if I cut my engines, the planet will pull me back down. So if I cut my engines right now, I will crash at the end of this red line. As I start getting away from the planet, you're going to see the red line pick up. It's now purple, so that means if I cut my engines right now, I'm going to end up in an orbit. And as that straightens out, it's going to turn blue, which means that I am now broken free of the planet's atmosphere. So let's get out here a little bit of ways, and then I will turn around and come back down to the planet, and we'll talk about how to land a ship. Now, again, the more weight you have, the more difficult it is to land a ship, especially on Alioth with 1 G of gravity. or 1 gravity. So the other planets, as they have lesser G's, you can land easier and easier with heavier loads. But on Alioth, coming in without very good skills will usually have your ship crashed. Now, how do you get around that? Well, you can have more engines. You can have more wings so that the fake air catches your wings as you're coming back down better. And things like that. So if you're designing ships and you need to carry heavier and heavier loads, well, the more engines you have. You can also start looking into anti-gravity generators, but those are very expensive, and is the reason why there's so many platforms around Alioth, because they only work above 1,000 kilometers. All right, so let me go ahead and cut my engines. I'm going to spin around here because now we're in space, so we're using space physics and not atmospheric physics. And I'm going to slam on my brakes. You can see all of these on top are my space brakes. You can see as I hit my brakes, they light up. Woo! And I did not counter that turn very well. I think I might go ahead and put more adjusters on this thing. So anyway, I'm going to get lined up with the planet again. I'll go ahead and engage my engines so that they're helping me slow down. So now I'm pointing in the opposite direction. All right. And you're going to see that velocity line is now heading back towards the planet. And so if I make no adjustments and I cut off my engine, that is showing me where I will crash. So I'm going to nose up here so that I'm kind of in line with the top of the planet, and it all depends on where you're trying to re-enter and where you're going. All right, I'm going to let go of my brakes. And that line should eventually line up with where I want to go. Now this DU orbital does have a bunch of things that can help you autopilot wise with re-entry and stuff, but I still prefer to do it manually because I have had issues where the autopilot just doesn't work correctly and just craters you in a planet. So as we're getting back towards the planet, the first thing you want to keep in mind is your throttle. So we're going about 35 kilometers per hour. I know that with my brakes, I can slow down enough to slow down before I hit the planet, or before I hit the atmosphere. Because if I hit the atmosphere going this fast, I'm going to immediately explode because my ship's going to burn up. So I'm going to hit my brakes, and it's a good point to like test to see how fast you can bring that speed down. And I'm still thrusting forward. So, yeah, my brakes are doing a very good job of that. I'm going to let it go. But obviously, if you get to like 8,000 kilometers per hour and you're just like, I'm going to get to the planet super fast, let's go. You're probably not going to slow down fast enough, especially if you're carrying weight. If I was carrying weight, my brakes would be struggling to get it down that fast, but I'm not carrying any weight. So that's why it's good as you're coming into the planet to test how fast you can slow down, especially once the gravity starts pulling you. So until gravity catches me here, I'm going to actually pull my throttle down so I'm not building speed that fast. And you'll see in a minute or two, once I get into the gravity well here, that I'm going to have to start monitoring some other things. Give it a bit more thrust. I think if I get to like 5,000 kilometers per hour, I should be good, but that's about where I want to start, not going above that. So let's go ahead and reduce my speed. So you can see that now this popped up. And this is because I have now entered the gravity sphere of the planet. So I am now descending towards the ground at 1,263 meters per second. Not so great. So I'm going to hit my brakes again, slow a little bit down. Now with this HUD, you're going to see a number pop up at the top that's going to tell me when I'm going to hit the atmosphere, but I'm not close enough to the planet. So I'm going to try to keep my speed at about 4,000 kilometers per hour until we get closer. And then I'm not going to care so much about the kilometers per hour. I'm going to care more about the meters per second here. Because I know that I can catch the air, or I can get lift at about 250 meters per second. If I'm going faster than that, then usually my ship will not generate lift and will crater into the planet. So let's go down here. All right, so now I've got the timer. I'm going to hit atmosphere in 3 minutes at this speed and falling sooner than 3 minutes probably. I'm still building speed. Once I get close enough, I'm going to go ahead and start monitoring my meters per second over there. I'm at 103 right here. You can see my altitude. I'm at 100,000 meters from the planet. So we're at 96 kilometers, 95 kilometers, 94 kilometers, and getting closer. All right. So let's go ahead and hold the brakes until I am descending at about 150 meters per second, and then I'm going to release it again. And I'm actually bringing my thrust up to full as I do this, so that I'm not slowing down so much when I hold the brakes, but I'm slowing down enough that I can keep the meters per second in a good point here, right? So we'll fluctuate between like 150. As I start getting closer, I'm gonna want to keep that tighter. Whoop. So let's drop that back down to 150 or 180 or something, and then let it go again. It's very important to keep my forward momentum, but I don't want to hit the atmosphere going too fast that my ship cannot get lift before it hits the ground. So I'm just kind of keeping it under control, because I'm used to landing this thing with weight. And when I have weight, I want to err on the side of caution. So it's very important to keep that speed under control. Now with less gravity, you don't have to worry about that as much, but with Alioth's 1G of gravity, you kind of do. So let's go down. I'm getting pretty close, so I'm gonna hold my brakes until I get that back under about 150, between 150 and 300. All right, 150. So I'm gonna let that build back up to about 300. I'm gonna tap my brakes again and get back down to 150. Let it build back up again. And you can kind of just hold your brakes off and on. Now, the reason I don't just cut my engines is because I want my forward momentum to keep going. I still want that forward momentum, because if I don't have it, then I'm just drop like a brick. And if you try to just engage your Atmo engines when you hit atmosphere, sometimes depending on your warm-up time, they don't have enough time to get up to power, and so you don't get a very good forward momentum. And we're coming down just perfectly right here, a little fast. Let's try to keep that in the 250 range. $240. All right, 11,000 kilometers, or no, 9,000 kilometers. All right, we're about to hit the 8765. When we hit 4, we're almost about to hit the atmosphere. Still going down a little fast. Let me pull that down more. All right, I'm gonna level off here. Here comes the burn speed, so I want to try to get that speed down before I break something. And we are now on atmospheric thrusters, and we have perfect lift, and I can level off, and I'm now going in atmosphere speed using my wings and my engines. Very, very good re-entry, and we're just going to go over here to my base, which I came right down on top of, and we're going to land. All right, so with this script, you can just do a brake-assisted landing. So if I hit G right now, you can see it says brake landing there. It's going to control my descent and keep it at about 30 meters per second as I'm coming down. And as I get near the ground here, it's going to fire my... Yep. It's going to fire my vertical thrusters and make me come to a nice stop. But I'm going to take off again here because I don't want to land over here. So if you're, if you overshoot your target, sometimes it's easier just to land and then taxi or turn yourself to the right direction and get going. I'm just going to taxi back over here. To our runway. Right. And I'm going to hit G and we'll come down nice and soft. If you were using the default HUD, same thing. You just want to get over where you're going. You don't have to do like a rolling landing, or you don't have to come in on the runway and glide. You can just kind of get over where you're going and slowly hold spacebar and let yourself come down. The only downside to this type of landing is you have to be careful with how much weight you have. So even if I do the brake-assisted landing, if I'm overweight or I have more weight than my vertical thrusters can handle, it's going to slam me into the ground. So there's no like safe, oh, you're always safe. Oh, I'm carrying 6 kilotons. Let me just hit G and I'll land safely. Well, if you don't have the amount of vertical thrust to counteract that, you're going to slam into the ground. And so when I'm testing ships to see how much they can handle, I make sure that my vertical thrusters can handle that. Now, that's also where we get into boosting, because with the same ship, if I have level 1 in vertical thruster placement, and I put those on, and I test that, and my ship blows up, I don't necessarily have to put more vertical thrust on. I can find somebody to boost them to level 5, and that gives me a great increase in the amount of vertical thrust that I now have. So boosting is very important in ship design, and when you buy a ship, if somebody says all components boosted at level 5, it's worth the extra price. I'll tell you that right off the bat. The only thing you want to avoid is if you buy a ship, do not take components off and put them back yourself, because you will remove the boosting to whatever your level is. And if you don't have any level, then you now have a level 0 boosted engine because you took it off and replaced it. So just be careful. And that is where I'm going to end the video. In the next video, we will go ahead and talk about the DU Orbital HUD and how it works and how you can use it most effectively, and all the little features that it has. But for now, I'm going to end the video here. As always, I will see you out in space. Stay safe out there.